Holiday Stress Guide for Scapegoat Survivors. Do you find yourself bracing for the holidays? Do memories or actual real experiences today of having to tiptoe around your narcissistic parent to make sure they feel appreciated at all times sap your enjoyment of the holidays? And do you find yourself just wishing that the holidays would already be over with? Well, this time of year can present specific challenges for scapegoat survivors. And in today's video, I want to explain what those challenges are, describe how those challenges have shown up in one anonymized case example, and offer you 3 tactics to make this holiday season one where you can offer yourself compassion, protection, and freedom. And I hope you'll watch until the end because I'm going to tell you how to obtain a free tool to put these tactics into action in your life today. Well, my name is Jay Reed and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping adults who survived childhood as the scapegoat to their narcissistic parent. I'm also such a scapegoat survivor myself, and before going too much further, I want to talk about who the scapegoat child and survivor is. And to do that, I need to first say one thing about the psychology of a narcissistic parent. I think it's important to start with an awareness that such individuals harbor a core sense of worthlessness within themselves that they find consciously impossible to tolerate and work with. Instead, they relocate that worthlessness into those around them. And typically, the people onto whom this worthlessness gets relocated to are those over whom such a person has authority over. So a child to such a parent certainly fits that bill. In an unconscious way, such a narcissistic parent will just see their child as worthless. And so by the emphasis on it being unconscious is it's not like a deliberative reasoning procedure of like, oh, well, they're doing X or Y, and therefore they are worthless in a kind of like objective or having some equanimity about the assessment. No, it's sort of something that gets, in essence, fabricated from such a narcissistic person's unconscious so that with absolute experience certainty, that child is worthless. Then the reasons come to fruition. So a narcissistic parent will see a child as worthless, and then they'll need to think and act in ways to influence that child to adopt the parent's feelings of worthlessness as that child's own. Here's where what I've called the 3 Ds come into action. The first D is devaluing the child. Secondly is depriving the child of needed emotional nourishment. And third is domineering or asserting control or dominance over that child. Acting upon the child in these ways conveys to that child that they must be worthless if they are being treated so, in essence, abusively and withholdingly by the parent. And in order to maintain a relationship with such a parent, which all children have to do just to psychologically survive childhood, the child has to adopt beliefs about themselves that make this treatment feel like it's that child's fault and therefore fit into the only reality their parent is offering them to share. So the child adopts the unconscious beliefs that they are undeserving and defective. This, of course, creates a very grim, constrictive, and tormenting quality of life for the child, but they're able to get what is most essential, which is a sense that they have a parent who's available to them. And to extend this, what I mean by scapegoat survivor is just an adult who survived this type of a childhood. And if you'd like a primer on how this all shakes out in the life of a scapegoat child, then I encourage you to check out my free ebook called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as the Scapegoat. Okay, well, the important term of scapegoat child and survivor having been defined, I want to quickly just give you an overview of the process of recovery from this form of abuse. In my own work with survivors and in my personal experience, I found these 3 pillars of recovery to be critical. First is making sense of what happened so that you ultimately get to know it wasn't your fault. Second is gaining distance from narcissistically abusive people today and closeness to safe people. And third is to live in defiance of narcissistically abusive person's rules. 3 challenges that the holidays pose for scapegoat survivors. First, this time of year typically brings more contact with our families of origin than other times of the year. And if you've survived and grown up in a narcissistic family, then you may experience more frequent or more intense pulls to re-inhabit the scapegoat role. Sometimes just by breathing the same air and being in proximity to the kind of original actors where this form of abuse took place, you may find yourself conforming to the derisive attitudes you encounter. And sometimes even despite working hard to protest such derision within yourself, that there can still be a way in which it seeps in. And I think this can particularly come to the fore in the form of noticing and getting occupied with ideas and feelings and thoughts that there's something wrong with you. For instance, if one of the ways you survived earlier in life was to adopt the belief that there's something wrong with your appearance, and doing so made it possible to again, share in that reality that your narcissistic parent offered you to exist in, then re-encountering such a parent at this time of year may result in an uptick of those kind of somewhat perhaps intrusive thoughts and uncomfortable feelings that say there's something wrong with your appearance. Maybe it means seeing yourself as unsightly in the mirror, or growing concerns about one's physical fitness or weight, or whatever it may be. The uptick of these kinds of internal experiences can often signal a kind of re-immersion into the older system. The second challenge faced by scapegoat survivors can be the memories that get evoked of past holidays where there was likely a hope for warmth and connection and joy, but maybe instead you found cruelty and or chaos. When that was the norm in your narcissistic family in the past, the disparity between what our culture says should be such a warm and inviting time of year, particularly with one's family, with what you know to be true at home, can be particularly painful. Sometimes narcissistic parents can grow particularly entitled to being shown admiration and appreciation during the holidays, and then particularly wrathful and vindictive at signs of others' failures to show them what they believe they deserve. When that's been your experience year over year, it can kind of create a kind of terrible but unfortunate kind of circadian rhythm that, oh, okay, come this time of year, things get bad, even though all around me, like in the broader culture and life, things seem to be going really good. And it can kind of signal in a kind of semi-conscious way, okay, bear down because things are about to get really rough. And the third challenge that the holidays pose for scapegoat survivors is actually what perhaps seems like a solution to the problem, and that is isolation of oneself. If your experience around others during the holidays in the past has proven to be cruel and chaotic, then avoiding others may seem like a very viable and needed solution to that. But the hazard of this solution by itself can be that it reinforces, I think, the primary dilemma of the scapegoat child and survivor, which is something like, if I have contact with others, then I have to put up with abuse. So removing oneself from others means you don't have to put up with that abuse, but it leaves unexplored finding others where connection doesn't have to commingle with abuse. So this solution can reinforce the idea that if you want to be safe, you have to be completely alone. And of course, there's going to be pain involved in isolation just in the experience itself as well. Well, I'd like to offer an anonymized case example to start to really visualize what I'm describing here at this time of year. It may already be well apparent to you in your own experience, but nonetheless. So Henry grew up as the scapegoat child to a narcissistic mother and emotionally unavailable father. His mother ruled the roost and everyone had to tiptoe around her. And that dynamic really showed itself around the holidays. She would grow even more tense and reactive than usual. She seemed to have in her mind the idea of how the perfect holiday should go, and anyone who seemed to get in the way of that was going to bear her vindictive wrath. Henry was already used to a steady diet of criticism from his mother, and this criticism would always be in response to supposed offenses that Henry had committed. Things like speaking to her in a supposedly disrespectful tone. But what such an offense really meant was that she might bark something at him that was telling him to stop whatever it was he was doing and come over to do her bidding. And if he showed even the slightest sense of disgruntledness at being bossed around like this, she would jump down his throat and assassinate his character for being so disrespectful, unappreciative of all she did for him as his mother, and so on. In essence, his mother would be offending from the victim position. But even this type of pattern would ratchet up around the holidays. It seemed as if she had a million tasks that she expected him to do for her, from cleaning the house to running errands, to whatever it may be. But the point was, he had to set aside all that might be important to him in deference to what she required of him. And if he did try to get some rest or find some time for himself, then she would see that as him committing the ultimate betrayal of her and the family, and again, wholly ungrateful for all of her supposed generosity. Of course, what couldn't be known at the time by Henry was that all those accusations were very good fits for how she was behaving towards him, but there was no one that Henry could know that with. So therefore, he had to stay in denial that there was anything wrong or inaccurate about what she was accusing him of. Well, Henry's family was Christian, so they celebrated Christmas. And Christmas mornings, when gifts were being exchanged, meant something very specific and dreadful for Henry. He knew he would have to show over-the-top gratitude and excitement for anything and everything that his mother might give him in terms of a gift. Regardless of whether he actually liked the gift he was given, he had to tell her how much he loved it, make direct eye contact with her, and emphatically exclaim thank you. He also had to make sure he got her a present that exalted her mothering. Maybe it was a card that thanked her for all she did for him and the family. None of this felt right to him in his body. He even felt a sense of nausea at having to go through these steps. He also, though, knew that if he didn't, things would get far worse. Well, if you grew up as the scapegoat child in your own family of origin, I wonder what challenges you face around this time of year. I think some of the worst parts about being a scapegoat child and survivor and during the holidays is feeling like you're the only one who's going through such difficulties. And that's brought to bear by how, all the joy that seems to be part of the holiday season with what it can truly and actually feel like in your own home. Well, I'd invite you to write in the comments section below the challenges you face in your family of origin as the scapegoat child or survivor, so we can kind of build a record of experiences around this time of year that really, I think, will demonstrate that no one's nearly as alone in all this as it may have seemed over the years. Seeing your own experience reflected in the comments of others of like, oh yeah, that rings similar to my experience, and reading what others write can really combat that isolation that's such a harmful yet usually universal feature of the scapegoat child and survivor's experience. A solution to these three challenges that the holidays present to scapegoat survivors. In essence, this involves the second pillar of recovery, which is moving away from narcissistically abusive people today and towards safe people. Well, moving away from narcissistically abusive people can be psychological and emotional. It can also be actual physical distance, or how people talk about no contact, but regardless of the form it takes, I think such distance involves three things. Accepting that this is who the narcissistic person in your family is, that they are extremely unlikely to change despite how much you wish they would, and allowing yourself to live alongside the sadness and grief that might evoke. As this reality gets accepted, the pull to get or remain close to a narcissistic parent lessens. This is because you get to let go of the hope that things might be different this time if only you, say, take good enough care of them so that they finally can let their guard down and share with you how hurt and wounded they feel, and thereby connect to the pain you've been put through. Or that if you could just explain to them in the right way how they've been affecting you by their behavior or callousness, that they would finally get it and be able to correct things in this way. And you get to let go of the hope that maybe if you offer certain nonverbal actions to get them to be the way you very much wish they should, and probably deserve to have had a parent who would operate that way, that things would then be different. Accepting that this is who they were, are, and will likely continue to be can all be somewhat liberating from these efforts to get things to be different. And the second part of this solution is to get closer to safe people. In essence, this means that instead of trying to effect outcomes with your narcissistic parent, for example, where you may have had to try to convince them to treat you well by taking such great care of them, or trying to show them just how harmful their behaviors have been and so forth, Instead of all of that, finding individuals where the type of good treatment you may have well been seeking from such a parent is just forthcoming. There's nothing needed to do to eke it out of them. And with such people, it can become possible to talk about why and how the holidays can feel so difficult. Being able to put words to that disparity between all the joy and sort of merriment in the sort of public sphere and kind of, again, the chaos and cruelty that you may have known historically in the private sphere at home. And ultimately, when it comes to combating the former strategy of isolation, finding such safe people can give you a reason to want to be around people ultimately. And I don't mean to oversimplify things, like just because you say find someone or a group of people who seem and are safe, that it'll feel that way right away. There might still, for instance, be the well-worn kind of coping style of how to be close to people, requiring you to go all the way over into their experience and take far more care of them than of yourself. But finding people who you suspect can afford you this kind of safe experience gives you room and a reason to try to test out if it is now safe to operate differently and in a way that's kind of promoting of yourself with them than it was in your narcissistic family of origin. Well, now that I've laid out the principle about how to secure a better experience for yourself during the holidays, a natural next question might be, well, how can one go about obtaining this for oneself? And I'll give one example, and is by no means exclusive. You can maybe take some of the principles I'm about to describe and find it in a lot of other different settings too in life. But anyway, the example I'll give is my Breaking the Scapegoat Spell online group class. This class meets for 8 weeks, and each class is 75 minutes long, and classes are small, allowing no more than 10 people at a time. The students who are invited to join are determined to be reasonably safe people, and the students who are invited to join are hand selected as safe people and who also identify as having been the scapegoat in their family of origin and are now adult survivors. So participants are in essence guaranteed a group of people with whom they can talk about what's difficult, whether it's the holidays or life in general, and speak to it to a group that really gets it. And that sense and experience of being understood and not alone in this is invaluable. And I don't just say that kind of sort of from my own lens, but also having listened to and asked folks who've gone through the class already what's been most valuable. And that aspect always rises close to the top. The sense and firm conviction that they're not alone in this, that there wasn't ever anything wrong with them, or rather in the kind of pathology of the system as it was helmed by the narcissistic parent. And that affords them a distance they get to achieve and then consider new, much more kind of compassionate and protective information about who they are. The class also arms you with tools about how to think about and approach memories of the kind of bad old days without getting swept up in them, so that recovery truly means moving forward in your life today with having the needed perspective on what happened back then, but also avoiding the sort of trap of getting too ensconced in what happened back then, because that, I think, itself can both mire one in their efforts to move forward, as well as kind of unintentionally sometimes serve the kind of narcissistic parents' sort of purposes of keeping them in the center of your focus at the expense of living your own life. And the course is designed to very much facilitate movement into your own life. Well, we just wrapped up the second cohort of the class, and after talking with folks about what they were able to get out of it, the theme that emerges is, in essence, not being able to see things in the same way again. That through the course instruction and through the work with their partner week over week, it's as if they can't go back nearly as in such a convincing way to believing that they were defective and undeserving sort of at face value. That now they see those thoughts and feelings and associated beliefs as products of a faulty system. And so, whether it's that whole, was it the red pill, blue pill from the Matrix idea. In essence, once this change occurs after going through it, you can't go back to how things used to be. And for the case, if you're a scapegoat survivor, that's usually quite a welcome thing, because the way things used to be were so self-diminishing and painful. Well, anyway, that's one example of how you might procure the company of safe people in your life today. But I want to give a different example and go back to our anonymized case example of Henry to show how he did it. So as an adult, Henry got married to a woman named Lynn, who turned out to be very different from his mother. She admired and respected Henry and demonstrated this to him very frequently. The first time that Henry and Lynn visited Henry's family for Christmas, she was shocked to see how much his mother would devalue and domineer him. When they first arrived in their mother's house, for example, Lynn was shocked that his mother told Henry right away, go to the store and get these groceries, and go and do it now, not later, but right now. Then she smiled in a kind of saccharine way towards Lynn, and which made Lynn feel extremely uncomfortable to have a person berating her husband and then kind of trying to smile or buddy up to her. Henry did his mother's bidding just out of familiar reflex, but something this time felt different. Being treated well by his wife Lynn made his mother's derisive treatment of him feel a lot less customary, and he felt arise a long-buried tinge of offense at his mother's treatment of him. As they were getting ready for bed that night, Lynn asked Henry, "Does your mother always treat you that way?" Henry felt an excitement at being seen, finally, but also the familiar fear that something terrible would happen if he said anything but praise about his mother. But he knew he could risk it with Lynn, and he said and exclaimed, "Yeah, I hate it. I don't know why she has to boss me around to get groceries like that the minute we walked in the door. It's like she just wanted to show you that she was in control over me or something." Well, this was a very important moment for Henry and for Lynn, but I can't say that everything changed from that moment onward. That's not how the process of recovery typically goes. It tends to be much more gradual and incremental. But what had happened was Lynn and Henry had created a mutual awareness of how Henry's mother had so routinely abused him in this kind of narcissistic manner, and how he'd learned that he must accommodate such abuse. When they returned from the holidays, Henry decided to seek therapy and begin in earnest the process of recovering from the subjugation he'd had to endure throughout his childhood. To go with this week's video, I put together a free tool to help you cope with and handle the stress of holidays if you are a scapegoat survivor. It walks you through what can set you off during the holiday time, what might help you stay steady, and helps you devise a simple plan for yourself to use before, during, and after any stressful holiday narcissistic family related experience. I designed it to help you put what's discussed today into practice in your own life. And you can find the link to this tool in the description box below, or by clicking here. And lastly, I really want to encourage you to check out next Thursday's new free monthly webinar called How Scapegoat Survivors Can Find a New Tribe. It'll go for 1 hour starting at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and in it you'll learn how and why the scapegoat child must live without a real tribe or place where they belong. Then how the survival skills honed in that situation can actually interfere with finding a new tribe for yourself today. Finally, I'll offer some tactics for putting into honorable retirement those former survival skills so that you feel less impeded in finding a tribe of safe people for yourself today. Well, if the holidays have begun to feel stressful already, I hope you found today's video helpful. And I want to thank everyone for your continued support and engagement with this channel and the resources around it. And as always, the comment section is just so awesome to read each week, and to, again, combat the isolation and sense of uniqueness in a negative way that the scapegoat child and survivor often has to endure. Seeing your story reflected in the stories of others as they're shared in the comments, I think just goes so far towards combating that. Not just for the individual contributors, but for those who also just read maybe and haven't yet posted their own comments or parts of their story. So with that, I look forward to posting again next week, and hope to see as many people as possible in next Thursday's free webinar too. Take care.